In the 1970s, the CIA sent an assassin to kill a target without a gun, without bullets, without poison. The mission was top secret. For the kill, he needed only eye contact. And that day, fate wasn't on the side of the victim as her eyes met his. And just like that, she would die. Eventually. The victim was a goat, an old one. It had to die after the massive psychic attack. They just didn't know when. But the attack had been so devastating that there was collateral damage. A goat died in an adjacent pen. Weeks later. Hey, when you want to believe, you do. And the CIA needed Congress to believe, because the Soviets had increased their budget for psychic research from $20 million annually to $85 million annually. The research wasn't new, Americans were fully aware of it. It all had begun with the Nazis. See, the bastards, they wanted more than political control. They wanted control of the mind. And where did they go? To concentration camps. And they did horrible experiments. Hypnosis, sensory deprivation, sleep deprivation, drug-induced obedience, torture, all forms of torture, brainwashing. They did it all. They wanted to find a point where mind breaks and how to rebuild it for it to obey. They wanted to create zombies, basically. And when the war ended, those scientists didn't disappear. They were drafted by the Soviets and the Americans. Kidnapped. But you know what I mean, right? The US called it Operation Paperclip. The Soviets called it Operation Oswabikim, or something like that. And within a few years, both sides had Nazi scientists doing the same research, just under different flags. But the United States didn't make much about it. They shrugged it off as nonsense. It was only at the end of the Korean War, when POWs came back home, that something bad happened. They were broken, brainwashed, repeating communist propaganda, like empty shelves running a program in a loop. And the army panicked. Could the Soviets have achieved mind control? It looked like they had. And so the US greenlighted Project MK Ultra. It was about breaking the human mind and see what was left. And those Nazi scientists, they were let loose on the American population. And they did some crazy shit. I just imagine a group of Nazi scientists going like, oh, we're gonna fuck them up so hard this time. And they did. There is a link in the description if you want to know more about it. But the Soviet increased budget came with something new, something the CIA hadn't seen coming. Nina Kulagina, the Soviets' first psychic soldier. Leaked videos in the 1960s showed Nina moving things with her mind. The Soviets were about to weaponize a newly discovered phenomena called telekinesis. Around that same time in Toronto, Canada, a group of skeptic scientists were set out to prove that ghosts didn't exist. And for their experiment, they created a fake one. They wanted to see how far suggestion could go when you truly believe in something. And so they created Philip Aylesford, an imaginary man from the 1600s. They met every week, meditated, focused, and asked Philip questions, asked him to show himself. And after months of silence, one night, the table moved. Knocks answered questions, and suddenly the skeptics were not that skeptical. See, all of this was happening in extreme control conditions, and everybody involved were scientists. This was the real deal. It became known as the Philip experiment, and to many it was proof that the mind could actually move things, convey messages through distance. And for the CIA, it was confirmation that the videos about Nina could be true. And then, somewhere in the 70s, confusion of LSD, polyester, and fear, the goat died. And suddenly America was involved in a new kind of war, the psychic wars, and they needed soldiers. Came Uri Geller, the Israeli performer that could bend spoons, stop watches, read sealed drawings with his mind, and reproduce basically all the phenomena that Nina had done in those videos. To the public, he was a magician. To the skeptics, he was a fraud, just like Nina. To the CIA, however, he was a possibility that turned into a fact after a phone call. See, Uri Geller was called by CIA Director Richard Helms, and during that phone call he was asked one simple question. Richard Helms said, "Can you tell me what I'm holding in my right hand?" Geller responded confidently, "You're holding a white-handled dagger." Richard Helm laid down on his desk a dagger with an ivory handle. As he hanged up, was it fate? Was it the Mossad? We will never know, but he guessed correctly. And in 1973, they brought in Uri Geller to the labs, specifically to the Stanford Research Institute, SRI, a civilian lab that quietly did contracts for the Army. There, physicists Puthoff and Russell Targ ran Geller through a list of controlled tests. In one of the tasks, he was asked to reproduce drawings sealed in envelopes. Sometimes he missed. Sometimes he guessed exactly what was inside the envelopes. Enough times that scientists wrote results beyond a statistical deviation, meaning they were abnormally accurate, defeating the chances of it only being guessing. And then came the experiment that sealed the deal. The lab used a random number generator, a machine that spits pure digital chaos. Uri Geller was asked to focus on one of the streams of numbers and to make it less random. When they checked the printouts, the numbers on Uri Geller's stream were not behaving randomly. The deviation wasn't huge, but it was beyond a statistical noise, enough to make a few people in Langley stare at the graphs in silence. Publicly, though, the story went very different. Magician James Randi confronted Geller on television, forcing him into a blind test that Geller hadn't prepared for. Under the lights, he froze. The spoons didn't bend. Nothing moved. And the world laughed. Randi declared Geller a fraud, and the media buried him. But within intelligence circles, some whispered that the Randi debacle was just a cover-up story to hide what he had accomplished in the labs. Years later, in an interview, Hal Puthoff, one of the directors of Project Stargate, admitted that Geller was one of the most talented psychics they had ever worked with. He couldn't mention the specific operations. They are still classified. The reason the American intelligence dropped him is because he had ties with the Mossad. So was he a con artist or the real thing? In the 1970s, nobody knew for sure. But for the CIA, a maybe, a dead goat, and a fake ghost moving stuff around was enough to start writing checks for their psychic soldiers. By the way, I'm leaving a link in the description for the Philip experiment if you want to know more about it. But it wouldn't be the CIA handling this project. It would be the Army Defense Intelligence Agency, and the project was to be named Project Stargate. First, they needed talent, so they asked through newspapers who wanted to submit themselves for trials. At first, the tests were childish. Just photograph and seal envelopes. Subjects needed to guess what was in them. The tests progressively got more difficult. Viewers sitting in dark rooms with nothing but coordinates. Most failed. However, a select few, a very rare group of individuals, somehow guessed correctly, more often than is statistically possible. They gave descriptions of objects, shapes, colors, windmills, harbors, mountains, lakes, enough to locate the target, and enough hits that the DIA stopped laughing and started taking the phenomena seriously. Out of these sessions emerged a small team at the Stanford Research Institute in California. Ingo Swann, Pat Price, Rosemary Smith, and Joseph McMoneagle, the architects of what they would call remote viewing. It was the only psychic phenomena that had rendered positive results in the labs. And according to declassified documents, they achieved some truly unexplainable success, and Project Stargate was operational. The first mission, Target 001, was assigned to Pat Price. He was just given coordinates. He described a large crane, cooling towers, concrete buildings, documents with Cyrillic letters, specific coordinates, and designs. Layouts. Analysts near halted the session. He was describing a Soviet weapons lab at Semipalatinsky, a site so secret few inside the US knew about it. They thought Price was a mole that had been fed data, but he didn't. Satellite photos later confirmed the drawings. Cranes, towers, layouts, everything was exactly the same. For the first time, the agency wasn't asking if remote viewing was real. They were asking how far it could go. During 1979, intelligence analysts were obsessed with the rumor of a new Soviet submarine larger than anything ever developed. But no blueprints existed, no port sightings, nothing concrete, just rumors. The case was assigned to Joseph McMoneagle. He drew a colossal vessel with two hulls side by side, launch tubes forward instead of aft. Unlike any submarine of its time, and he gave coordinates of where it was being built. Intelligence officers dismissed it as imagination. It couldn't be possible. But then months later, at the coordinates given by McMonagle, the first KH-11 spy photographs arrived. They showed a Typhoon-class submarine, NATO's codename for the Akula. 2 pressure hulls, forward missile tubes, massive displacement, exactly as drawn by McMonagle, who would later receive the Legion of Merit for unusual intelligence contributions. In 1983, a Soviet Tupolev reconnaissance airplane vanished somewhere over Central Africa. It was carrying surveillance electronics, technology that the US wanted desperately. American satellites couldn't find it. Reconnaissance airplanes came back empty. As a last resort, Stargate was called. The case was assigned to Rosemary Smith, an artist turned psychic analyst. She was only handed a code. No map, no clue. She described a metal bird broken near a river against a green mountain, and she gave them a set of coordinates. An analyst located the point in the map. It was deep inside the jungles of Saide. Recovery teams went in. They found the wreckage a few miles from her mark, within her described terrain. The black boxes, the cameras, were retrieved before the Soviets could get to them. It was a massive success for Project Stargate. Then Ingo Swann at Menlo Park was given the mission to describe Jupiter. This was 1973, and he spoke about auras, magnetic storms, and rings, faint dusty close to the planet. 6 years later, Voyager 1 would confirm the existence of all the phenomena, including the rings of Jupiter, rings no telescope on Earth had ever seen, magnetic fields nobody had guessed they would exist, all things described by Swann. With more than 500 success cases in the 80s, things turned weird. There was a report by one of the remote viewers about a potential secret facility in Mount Seal, Australia, which the viewers suspect might be an advanced weapons development facility. When a CIA analyst inquired the area, the local chief station reportedly responded, "Oh, you mean where the UFOs are always flying around?" This gave way to the hunt of the aliens. And in 1984, McMonagle received a new coordinate, no name, no context. As he concentrated, he began seeing pyramids. These were 10 times larger than the Giza pyramids. "Have we discovered new pyramids?" he asked the controller. The controller answered back, "Focus on the target, describe them." McMonagle proceeded, "They are red now, damaged. Go to a time where they were new." He responded, "Now they're white, with metal tips. But the planet is dying. This is a last resort to survive, to wait for the others." "Where have the others gone?" asked the controller. "They went to look for a second home." "Who are you speaking to?" asked the controller. "What I'm speaking to isn't alive. The beings it care for are. They look human, just thinner and taller, but definitely human. But I am speaking to a machine, and it is inside the pyramid." Then silence. When the session was finished, later on, the truth was revealed. The coordinates were on Mars, a region called Sidonia, 1,000,000 years in the past. And the pinpoint location? The pyramids of Sidonia. Scientists refer to them as erosional buttes, formed by sediment, shaped by wind erosion, and marked by shadows. Nothing extraordinary, they claim. Yet with every re-imaging, with every new camera, the same geometric pattern appears, and NASA has never released the raw data. What they do give to the public are calibrated and corrected process versions. This, they explain, is a standard procedure. However, this also implies that nobody outside of NASA has ever had access to the raw data itself. By the 1990s, the Stargate had logged over 600 successful declassified missions. The core of them remained classified. And here we need to take a step back, because Stargate was scrutinized like no other project. This was not a CIA Black Ops, it was a military project under the US Army and the Defense Intelligence Agency. Every year, 3 distinct committees needed to greenlight the project to keep it running. The Science Committee, the Technical Board, and the Operational Council, each with a different task. The Science Committee evaluated that the results had been obtained under controlled conditions. The Technical Board, that the missions had been assigned randomly and that the data could be useful in the field, and whether or not this data had produced positive results. And all was fed back to the Science Committee for statistical analysis. And the Operation Council, they reviewed the math and the results, the real-life results. of the intelligence, and every year budgets needed to be renewed, not on belief but on performance. Demonstrations were held live for Senate Intelligence Committees. Only success meant another year of funding. Stargate was operational for 20 years. Many of its members received honors for their contributions to the intelligence community. Ingo Swann went further. He built a system, the Controlled Remote Viewing, or CRV, protocol. By the 1990s, the method left the government and entered the public. Ex-military viewers Ed Dames, Lynn Buchanan, and Paul Smith opened schools. Today, you can order the manuals from Amazon. Like a six-pack, anyone can get one. But few put the effort. Remote viewing, at least in theory, can be learned by anyone. Few do the work, but those who do see results. But despite these anecdotes, a congressional mandate closed Stargate in the 1990s, concluding that while some lab results show a statistical significant effect, the information lacks sufficient quality for actionable intelligence. As a result, the program was officially terminated in 1995. Kinda, because it went private and it's still running to this day. So from guessing sealed pictures to describing rings around the planet, from locating crashed airplanes to talking to ghosts of another world, Project Stargate was never statistically debunked. It proved its worth for 20 years of scrutiny, and the project still works under private contract. So maybe this one is a true mystery of the mind. Okay, maybe talking to Martians is a stretch. We need to concede that one. But that aside, the phenomenon is real. You can test it yourself. And if you do, please write in the comments. So thank you for your time. Please subscribe. It really helps the channel. And see you in the next one.
The Fuku Files!